welcome back. Today I'm going to share with you how to create this beautiful card with our zig pins. So what I'm here is I did two different cards, and I'd used the black here because I felt that you could see a little bit better working with them. And I'm going to share with you the different techniques I shared with the first video. So here I am going to lay down some color first. So we're just going to get right into it. I've already used the black embossing powder here. For the first card I used some clear embossing powder, but I thought that the black would show better so you could see how I'm working. So we're just going to lay some water down first, and then we're just going to throw some color on that water. And we're just going to lay it down and continuously go over and get a nice dark blue color. And then I'm going to grab some of the green and just lay down some green here too. You can see it's already starting to blend, and because it's wet on wet, and I shared with that in the first video how it just beautifully naturally blooms and it blends together just perfectly. But I'm going to go over it with my brush too, just to get that subtle blending effect that I'm really looking for. Now we're going to add a second layer here, and that's just where the darker edges are, and I just think that that just contrasts just beautifully. And you don't have to use a brush to blend in it if you don't want to, but I have a tendency to just like to just add a little bit more, but you don't have to. And you can see here I didn't do that at all here. It just naturally blends in together. But if you're a little stickler and you like a little bit more of a blending technique, go ahead and grab your brush after that and just add a little bit of blending with your watercolor brush. And here I am just laying down that first color. It's naturally just blooming and just spreading out naturally. And we're just going to lay down a little bit of green, and I'll have all the colors that I'm using in the supply list. And then going again into the darker areas where we really want it to be just a little bit richer dark. We don't have to use our watercolor brush at all. And then again, just right here, we're just going to add a little bit more darker. And you can keep playing with it if you don't feel like this is dark enough. And you could just use different colors. You could just use anything. It's so fun. And so next what we're going to do is we're just going to lay down color first. And I'm using purple and pink here. So I'm just going to lay down the purple. Now the thing is that if you want a really beautiful light effect, don't lay down so much color, the dark color. Just use a little bit and then naturally spread it out, and you'll get a lighter effect, as you can see in my first card. With this card, I'm using a little bit richer colors because I really want you guys to see this effect. And I'm just going to spread this out now, and we're just going to combine the colors and blend it all in together. If you work slow, I suggest that you do one wing at a time instead of doing the two wings like I am doing. But I'm working pretty quickly here, so my ink hasn't dried and I won't have any problem with the blending. And as you can see, I just kind of felt that that was not bright enough, so I'm going back over it again, and this is wet, and I'm just laying that color on top of the wet paper and just blending it in just a little bit more. But if you want it to be light, don't add a second layer. And we're just going to go over here on the side again, lay down that color on the dry watercolor paper. We're not putting down any water first. And just coloring it in. And when I'm laying down that beautiful pink, I'm actually going over into that purple a little bit to kind of blend it together, as I shared with you in that first video. And I'm kind of already starting to blend in those colors. When you're blending in, you want to go from light to dark, so you don't want to pick up that purple and push that into the pink. You want to leave those separate. So that's why I'm continuously washing my brush and making sure that that purple doesn't bleed into the pink, because you don't want to have it. You can see I accidentally did that here, and I'm like, oh no, now I have to go over in this side and do it. So we just want to make sure that, when you touch that purple, it's so much more darker. You want to leave that into the purple areas. I'm just going to go over it again here because I just didn't think that that was dark enough. Now that I had to do it on my second wing, I made it a bit darker. And just blending that into. And so you can see how much darker here it is, and then how much lighter it is on that first butterfly too, just to make sure. And I'm just going to take this apart and share with you the pink and the light pink and the light yellow that I'm using. And again, I'm just going to lay down some color. We're just going to go in there, and then I'm going to grab just a smidge of that pink up on the top. See, I'm just kind of coloring my pen, and we're just going to lay down that darker area right there. And that's just beautiful. And I have some left over here, so I'm just going to use that. And now I'm wiping off that tip like I was telling you about, just so I can make sure that it's nice and pink. And now we're just going to go through, and I'm also pulling into that color, that yellow. I'm actually touching some of that light pink right here. And now what we're going to do is just get that watercolor brush wet. And I don't like a whole lot of water on my brush, so I've been dabbing it off on my cloth that's sitting on my lap here, just so I don't have to have that much water in there. But you can use as much water as you would like. It doesn't matter. If you do use a bit more water, dry your brush off, and then you can pick it up with your brush, and that will pull up some of that water too if you put too much water down. If you do use too much water, just be careful. It might actually spread underneath that embossing, and it might go into the areas where you don't want it to go. So here I am again, just getting that tip wet with that different color and highlighting the corners. And I don't want the rest of it on my brush here, so I'm just wiping the excess off. And now I'm just laying down some of that yellow, going into the pink in a little bit, and just pulling in some of that pink color. And now I'm going to grab my brush again and dab off the excess and just spread that beautiful color, making sure that my pink doesn't go too far into the yellow. So when I grab that, you can see that I'm kind of pulling out some of that color. But if I pull out too much, I'm going to turn that yellow into a different color, and I don't want that. So I'm dabbing it off and making sure that I stay with the yellows and not pulling that pink into that yellow area. Okay, now we're going to go with our reds and our pinks here, and I'm just going to go back over and get that wet. And again, if you are a slow worker, please just make sure you do one part of the wing at first and then do the next. Now I'm just laying down that red, and I'm not using a whole lot of area here, if you can tell. That is because the red is super dark, and a little bit goes a long ways, so you really don't want to get it too saturated with color, because then you won't have a very good gradient of dark to light, and you really want to play with that. So just play with it, put down a little bit of color and spread it around and see how you go. And then also, you can always go back and add a little bit more darker color for a bit darker. Here I am, I just thought that was too light, so I'm just adding a bit more. And then just spread it around and see how it feels. Just give it a play. You might like just a little bit, or you might like a really rich. But if you put too much of that red down, you're not going to see a gradient from dark to light. And that's something that's what we're going for in this tutorial. Okay, and I'm just going to do the other side, and I accidentally forgot to lay down some watercolor first. So I'm just going to color that with some water, just kind of spread around and get that nice and wet first. And then I'm going to add a little bit of that red. So I kind of made a little mistake here. You can see where it kind of spread around and the red kind of went into that other part too. But that's okay. We're just going to cover it up with some orange, and you won't even be able to see. And half the wing is off the page anyway, so there won't be a very big gradient there. And just spread that ink around. It's so much fun, just so relaxing, and it's so fun just to keep playing with that ink. And just making it nice and dark near the center for a beautiful gradient. And then just adding a little bit more orange. And just keep playing with it. You can make it as light or as dark as you like. Okay, so now we're going to do our little butterflies here, and I'm just going to go color the center with a nice dark rich blue, and then I'm going to go with a little bit of a lighter blue. And again, I'll have all these colors that I'm using on our blog post page so that you can know exactly what I used. And now I'm just going to spread that ink around, that watercolor ink, and it's just beautiful, and it's just nice and simple, these little ones are. So give it a practice and give it a go. You can try different color combinations. You can go dark, rich, light. As you can see that this one's a bit brighter and darker than my first one. And it's just, you can just do so many different colors. And also I used on the first card, I used clear embossing powder. And this one I'm using a rich black embossing powder. I accidentally grabbed the wrong color here, so I have to go and grab my yellow. I lost my yellow underneath my towel. So I'm just going to play with that, and you can also add the two colors together and change the colors dramatically, and that would be so much fun too. So this is our last butterfly, and the next I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then we'll color our background, and I think that that will be beautiful too. But we want to make sure that these butterflies are completely dry before we add the background, because we might have a tendency to have them bleed into each other. We don't want to have that after all this work that we did. So let me just grab my watercolors here, and I'm just going to use the turquoise in the watercolors. And what you're going to do is you're going to grab a number 12 brush, and we're just going to get that paper wet, and that just helps create a uniform background. So if you do watercolor without getting it wet, so you just lay that watercolor, you're going to have a bit more of a, not as a beautiful bloom and a blending between the colors, because you'll have a bit of an edge and you don't want that. So you want to just make sure that it's wet already, and just lightly go into those sides, being very careful not to touch the butterflies, but getting close enough that it's not going to leak into it. That embossing powder does help a little bit of a edge to it, but sometimes if that watercolor is too wet and you're laying down too much water, it has a tendency to leak into that embossing. So you're going to have to really play around with how much water to lay down. Not too much. As you can see, I dabbed off my brush there just to make sure I didn't have too much water on my brush and onto that paper. And going over it lightly first, and then you can see it just blooms naturally, and then you can just spread that around, and you'll have a more uniform background, and it'll look really beautiful. So just pushing that ink up and over into the corners very gently. And you can use different colors if you would like. You can use it a little bit darker at the top and then go lighter as a contrast. Just play around with what you love, and you could do whatever you want and keep playing and coloring. You could do just so many different things with this card. And just going up here at the top, not having to worry about getting it wet first because there is nothing that's touching it. We're just wanting to make sure that the blue runs beautifully into it. We don't have any hard line edges against each other, so that everything is all wet. Now you could tape this down if you want. Some people are adamant about taping down your cards, but I don't. I just feel that it's just beautiful just laying it down. And here's another little technique to use. You can just drop some color in and let it bloom naturally and then spread it, or you could just leave it all on your brush. It's really up to you. Just sharing you with just the different ways that you can drop in some color. And it's just really starting to pop, isn't it? Coming to life. And just moving that color down here. Being very careful not to touch those butterflies. And don't really worry too much if you get a little bit of color outside your butterflies. Here's when you're going to grab it and pull those colors, and then you can see that you won't be able to see the different yellow. I did go all the lines on that yellow, but here you can see it's just going over with that blue and you won't be able to see. Now I'm just going to wait for this to dry, and I'll see you in the craft room to put it together. Okay, so it has completely dried now, and how to test this out is I'm just going to use the back of my finger, and we're just going to lightly tap to make sure it's dry. And so I'm just going to use some of this Ultimate Glue here, and I did leave it open overnight on accident, so it's a bit hard for me to get out. And I find that watercolor paper has a hard time adhering with double-sided sticky tape, so I just like to use some glue. And we're just going to put some glue down and then find the center of our black cardstock, and we're just going to lay that down and center it here. Like so. Okay, so then we're going to grab some white crochet trim, and we're just going to pull off the back of the tape, And this is back in stock now, so it's great. And I have links here. All our supplies and things are back in stock. We got our big shipping container this week, so it's really exciting to have new back in stock products. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for a lot of things, so I'm really excited to be announcing that this week. And I'm just going to flip that over, and we're just going to cut off some of that excess crochet trim right here. And just clip that off so we make a nice even edge on this corner on the side here. Okay, so then we're going to grab our sentiment, and I've already used and stamped and already cut out with the Big Shot, and I'm using the Happy Occasion sentiments, and we're also using our Fancy Labels 3 die, and I'm just going to use this bottom one right here. And here it is, and I've already done everything for you. And so we'll flip this over, and we're going to use some foam dimensionals here. And I have a hard time with foam dimensional sticking to crochet tape or even watercolor paper again. So I'm going to share a little tip here for you. And we're just going to take the back of this paper off. And I'm going to grab some of that glue again. And I just love this glue, and it just adds a little bit extra adherence to our cardstock. And just put a little bit of dot on each of those and flip it over. And then we're going to have to work quickly because it does dry quickly here. Line that up. And oh, it's not perfectly straight. I'm having a hard time seeing with the camera, so I'm just going to quickly grab this and move this around like so. Excuse me as I try to get this straight for you. There we go. Nice and straight. And so next we're just going to grab some clear sequences and just kind of toss them on and see where they land. They don't have to be in any particular order. You can use a lot or just a couple of them and move them around until you find what you like. And so what I do is I take the glue and I put a little bit of dab of glue on my finger, and then I pick up each sequence and I just kind of hit it lightly with a little bit of glue, and that's how I lay down my sequences. There's different ways and different forms that people use, but this is what I seem to do over and over again, and it works pretty consistently for me. And the last one here. There we go. Now we'll get this out of the way and we'll just adhere it to our cardstock base. And we're just going to lay more glue down again. We're just going to use some of that Ultimate Glue, and it's flowing a little bit better now, now that the dry bit has come off. And just lay down some glue on that cardstock base, and then we're just going to grab it and then just lay it down flat. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial from start to finish. And I used two different styles here with the beautiful dark butterflies, and we also had the light clear embossing powder. But you can go either way if you want with your cards, and I hope that you've really enjoyed this tutorial today. And if you have any questions, don't forget to leave a comment, and I'm sure I would love to talk to you soon. And you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and don't forget to check out our blog at JoannaMunster.com. Thanks so much, guys.